This training series is brought to you by a generous grant from Impact 100 and Autism Pensacola.
What we're going to be talking about tonight is all about IEPs. And the topic tonight is that you are the key to a successful IEP for your student. And we're going to be talking about participating and preparing for your child's individualized education program. My name is Amy Lorton, and I am the consultant at Autism Pensacola for Special Needs Education. Also serve in a different role there as the executive assistant to the CEO and the office manager, and however else I can help out while I'm there. So Autism Pensacola is the proud sponsor of this video, along with a generous grant from Impact 100. And with that, we'll get started. How many of you have ever felt like this, preparing for or being in an IEP meeting or after the IEP meeting? Head and hands, just saying, ugh, another IEP. What am I going to do? And how many of you would like to feel this way? Wow, I can't believe what a great IEP meeting that was, and how successful it went. Well, I hope that tonight I'll give you some hope and inspiration as we talk about some ways to get to this feeling, to get you prepared for that. Tonight's overview, what we're going to discuss tonight is these tips here, these items, the basics of IEPs, the purpose of an IEP, how to learn about your rights, and then how to plan, organize, and prepare for your role in the meeting, after the meeting, and some problem solving hints, and the school's wish list. What is an IEP? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about why there's an IEP. And the reason why there's an IEP, and then we'll discuss what an IEP is there's a federal law that was enacted in 1975, called the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act of 1975. That came on the heels of some legislation to help students in the public school system get their needs met who have disabilities. Now, this law was revised in 2004, and it's now called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, and they added a word in there, the Improvement Act, because they did make some improvements to this act. And this act specifically affects your child's education if they have a Section 504, if they have an IEP, for providing education in an appropriate setting, meeting their needs for all children in the public school system. Basically, IDEA protects your child's right to a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, according to your child's individual needs. Now, that's a mouthful, and within that mouthful there's some acronyms. You may have heard from your school system, if your child's in the school system, FAPE, F-A-P-E, and that's where this comes in, the free and appropriate public education. You may have heard LRE, that's the least restrictive environment. And basically, this law protects your child's right to getting an education according to their individual needs. Now, what is an IEP? IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. The IEP is a written legal document that describes the education plan for a student with a disability. Now, some of you may already have an IEP for your student, some of you may not have a Section 504, you might be going through the evaluation process. But if the school district has identified a need for your child to receive special ed services, then they will probably have an education program written for them, an individualized education program, also known as the IEP. Now, there's some things that we need to know about an IEP. And what is the IEP all about? What does it talk about? Well, first of all, it talks about the student's disability, what skills the student needs to learn in order to succeed in the school environment, what the student will do in school every day, and what services the school will provide. When we talk about services, we're talking about things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, any type of modification to their environment, and what services the school will provide. and then where the student's learning will take place. In other words, will it take place in the general ed classroom or a special needs self-contained classroom or an off-site location? Where will it take place? And then what is the purpose of an IEP? We now know what an IEP is, but what's its true purpose? The purpose of an IEP is to make sure that everyone, that means the student, the teacher, the staff at the school, and the parents, know what the specifics of the educational program are and how each will be implemented. Now, you have an opportunity here as the caregiver, the parent of this student to be one of the key monitors of this plan, because you as a parent or guardian of the student are invited to be a team member of this plan, of this program. So you have the opportunity to participate fully and be a team player and be a monitor of the plan. Now, the IEP is developed during an IEP meeting, and some of you may have experienced this already. The people who are concerned with the student's education meets, and that could be your grandparents, your sister, your brother, your neighbor who babysits your child. Could be anybody who's just interested in the development educationally of your student. Well, they all meet and discuss and develop the individualized education program and the goals that are written in that program. Now, again, you have an opportunity to be one of the key developers of this plan. Now, understanding a little bit about your participation and preparation involving this IEP process, the key thing here to first know is your rights. Your student has rights. You also have rights as a team member, supporting your student, advocating for them. I would suggest that you do your homework when it comes to learning your rights. You're going to need to read some more. Those procedural safeguard notices that you get at these meetings, that you flip through the booklet and that the school will hand to you before your meeting, that's very important information. I would suggest reading it. It is accurate, it's concise, and it's written in language that we can all understand. And then you can go to any of these websites that I've listed up here on the slide. These are all websites that I think are wonderful to get information from. One of them is our federal website talking about your rights under IDEA. And the other one underneath it is our Florida website, Department of Education. And the link is a direct link to free and appropriate public education information and your rights thereof. And then the last one is a website called Rights Law. Some of you may have heard of Rights Law. It's a very parent-friendly website that has full of information that you can use, resources, documents, questions that are answered that you probably have questions about, all about IEPs, all about getting ready for an IEP, preparing for one, what to do if things go off the track. Lots of books and other publications available. Trainings are available. Things like learning how to read test scores, all types of information. I would also encourage you, skipping back up to the top here, to join a group of parents who have similar concerns. We have on our website, we have some great information for you to join a live chat or a web chat. There's web pages you can join. Just start asking questions, get connected face-to-face or through the internet with other parents. You'll gain a lot of information and support that way. Now, let's move on to getting organized. Let's say, okay, I have an IEP with my child or about to develop one with their team, and how do we go about getting organized to prepare for that IEP? First thing I'm going to tell you, it's work. I'm not going to lie to you. It's work to monitor the program effectively and to make sure things are going well. And so I put up here, roll up your sleeves, because it's going to take a little bit of work. And I believe that preparation is the key to a successful meeting and successful team interaction, because preparation equals empowerment for you. It also translates into effective teams. You're getting along, you understand each other, you've got an agenda, you're kind of trucking along, And that translates into your child's success. So preparation on the front end gains success on the back end. I would also encourage you to do some preparation in learning the language, the education speak, if you will, the alphabet soup that you hear in these meetings or reading these letters that come home or these notices. So what does that mean? Like you asked me, what is IEP? That's education speak. So it's time to learn the language, and part of the way you can learn the language is to ask, what does that mean? Can you please tell me what FERPA is? Can you please tell me what a PLOP is? Or what a DEA assessment is? These are questions that you should feel free to ask in your meetings, and they'll give you the answers, or you can go look for the information yourself. There's resources out there. Those websites that I put up earlier are good resources for that. But the more comfortable you get with understanding the education speak, the more participation you can lend to your meetings, the more you will be in the know and not have so much anxiety about speaking up and contributing. I would also encourage you to roll up your sleeves as far as compiling records for your child. Understanding where your child is and where they were, where they need to go. That's all about record keeping. If you don't have a copy of your child's records, if you don't have the previous IEP or their test scores or their grades, if you're just kind of disorganized, you don't have all that, you don't know where it is, can't you put your hands on it, or you never had it, I would say request that from the school. You have a right to all that information anyway for free, and they can provide that to you if you give them a written request. And then you can start organizing some of that. And I recommend using a system to organize that. And up here I mentioned an IEP binder. That is quite simply a 3-ring binder, or something that you feel comfortable using that could compile all your papers together, that you can tab and mark and put folders in, something to keep you organized. That's what you use when you get that paperwork back from the school, your records. If you already have an IEP, 3-hole punch it, put it in there, tab it with this year's date, and you're already on your way to getting organized. I would also encourage you to save some work samples from your students' classroom work. Those are very telling, I think, sometimes to how well they're progressing or not progressing. And sometimes there's notes written on there by the teacher that may be helpful to you later. But try to gain a portfolio along the way of samples from the classwork of how your student is doing in each academic subject. Also, you want to put in their assessments, and that means quizzes, tests, any other informal assessments they're doing on your student, and any correspondence that you're getting from the school, emails, notes, checklists, anything like that, or letters that you want to put in your 3-ring binder and tab it, correspondence, assessments, grades, classwork. Keep organized. And then I would recommend that you have a current and an archived means of storage. And what I mean by that is you have this year's binder. It says Bob 2014-2015 school year. And then you have a binder that says 2013-2014. And you just keep one binder per academic year, and you're not having this big giant 5-inch binder by the end of their school term, and you know where everything is. You can just pull it off the shelf for that year and reference something that you need to find quickly. And then I would also encourage you to find a documentation method that works for your organizational style. What works for me probably won't work for you, maybe, but maybe not. So whatever is going to keep you on it and current, and I would recommend do it when you get it. If you get an email from the school, print it out, 3-ring bind it right away. It's easier to do it a little bit at a time than to have a big stack on your desk and you're like, oh, now I got to go through it and figure out where it goes and who was that for. And so a little organization along the way is a lot less stressful than letting it pile up. Some other tips about getting organized. I would encourage you to identify and articulate your child's needs. This is a huge, huge part of success for your child's education plan, because you know your child the best. There's experts at that table that you're going to be meeting with, But you're an expert too. You're your student's expert. You know them better than anybody sitting there. Even if that person sitting across from you has been teaching your child for years, you still know them best. You know, mom and dad, grandma and granddad, they know the child the best. So what I would encourage you to do is to communicate how well you know your student with the team. If you see something at home that you feel might be a concern at school, bring it up and see, are we seeing this behavior at school? Well, this is how we address it at home. Maybe we could try addressing it this way at school and have some success. And what I would encourage you to do is to create something called a primer for your team. This could be a list of just kind of a bullet point list of information about your student, how they perform academically, what their social skills are, what their independent living skills are, what their communication needs are. And when I say a need, by the way, and I know I'm using education speak some here, so let me clarify what a need is. A need is what educators consider to be what is identified as maybe a deficit or something that we need to intervene or remediate or give some extra support to so that there could be success in learning. For instance, if you have a student who has difficulty focusing on a task in a classroom unless they're moving somehow, then maybe we get them a wiggle cushion they can sit on and kind of wiggle around or allow for movement in the room before doing an activity. That's a need. They need to have movement in order to succeed and learn in class or focus. Maybe a student has to be redirected several times, prompted to stay on task, either verbally, non-verbally, with incentives or whatever. That's a need. They need that in order to succeed in the classroom. So that's what we're talking about as far as needs. So when you're thinking about creating a primer for your team, this list of needs, think about not in terms of services, because I get a lot of parents that ask me, well, I think they need speech, I think they need OT, I think they need this, and I would say, why? Why do they need it? What need determines that? So that's what they're going to be asking the school. So think in terms of what your child's needs are. Don't focus on the disability necessarily, but what you observe. What do you see? What are we going to hear? What's it going to look like? Those are observable. And then make a list of that. Also, you want to document what you observe as working and not working for your child, either currently in the school system or if they're not enrolled yet, say they're in preschool or they're still at home, what's working and not working at home. Well, I know my child, he does really well when I give him a picture clue. Okay, that's great to know for the school-based team. And, you know, he responds well to verbal encouragement, let's say. Or maybe your child does well with frequent breaks and breaking up tasks into smaller bits. These are all valuable pieces of information for a school-based team to know. And again, it's observable behavior. So it highlights a need. Also, I would encourage you to include your child's perspective. If your child can communicate effectively with you what they feel like their needs are, what they feel like would be best or appropriate to use to help them have success in any type of learning situation, whether it's church or school or home, then that would be very useful. Sometimes they can communicate that with us, whether it's a tantrum on the floor or they say, hey, I'd really like to have a little gummy on the end of my pen so I can not have to worry about my grip. So let's say we're getting ready for our IEP meeting. We need to have a plan. Everybody's got to have a plan when they go into a situation, business meeting, battle, any type of major event. So we need a plan for this IEP. The first thing I tell you is to think broadly. Think with the end in mind. What do you want the outcome to be? And when I say outcome, I mean long term. Have a good idea of how you'd like your child to progress this year, next year, the year after that, and consider those type of thoughts and dreams, if you will, to be your parent goals for your child. And you're planning this IEP, this current IEP, let's say the child's 3. We're thinking long term when they get out of the school system at 22. Where do you want to see them end up, hopefully? And then let's start planning for that now. Now, I'd also encourage you to have an ultimate goal in mind for your child's educational outcome. Have we thought about a degree choice? Is it going to be standard diploma, alternate diploma? Have we thought about post-secondary dreams? Are they going to college? Are they going to graduate with a certain degree? Are they do they have interests already that we can be looking at? What about their family, marriage, their social life, their job hopes? We need to always plan with this in mind, even if the child's very young. Because we know where they are now, but we don't really know where they're going to be one day. And so we always push for the hope of the potential of what could be. So that's the first thing I want to say about having a plan. You need to get that in your mind. Okay, where do we want to go with this? And then I'd also encourage you to consider, as you're about to go into this meeting and preparing for it, that this is a business meeting. And I know that's difficult to think about, but you need to be businesslike and be prepared as if you were going into a business meeting. You got your papers all online, you got your 3-ring binder, you're dressed for it, you got the attitude about it, and know that you are a key team member. In fact, I tell parents a lot of times, I say, okay, your child's name is Charles. This is Team Charles, and you are the team leader in a way because you are your child's expert. And you're going to be helping to monitor the plan. You're not necessarily running the meeting, but you're a very key player. And don't ever forget that. IDEA is very specific about a parent's role or a caregiver's role in planning an individualized education program. It's very strongly encouraged, and it does say this, and I want to include this in our talk today because I think it's very important. Some parents choose not to participate in their child's plan, and I think it's very sad because they know so much about their child. But also know that IDEA is a federal law, and the school district is mandated to serve your child and their needs, address the needs, and implement a program that's going to help give them success, whether you participate or not. So I would encourage you to participate. Now, let's talk about the meeting. What you can do to prepare for the meeting. I would encourage you to have what's called a parent agenda. Every business meeting that I've been to anyway has an agenda. Usually has a timetable, who's going to say what, what's going to be discussed, old business, new business, what are we going to decide on, what are the action items. You could have an agenda too. I call it the parent agenda. Whether you present this to the team or not, at least you have in writing for yourself what you would like to be discussed, what questions you have for the team, what concerns you have, and what you'd like to see accomplished by the end of the meeting. That's called the parent agenda. There's also something called the student agenda, and the student agenda is a very valuable tool for preparing for a meeting if your student can verbalize to you or somehow communicate to you what they'd like to see different or improved or asked of the team. And you can either do this in writing or have your student participate. Yes, you can have your student in the IEP meeting if it's appropriate. And this could be as many as 70 questions and concerns for the team, or it could be one question that the student has, like, can I go to the library more often? That's important. Your child's going to have a voice with the team. And then I would encourage you, as you're formulating your plan, your preparedness for the meeting, to have at the ready a rationale. Anticipate what the team's going to be talking about, what are we discussing, anticipate what the outcome might be, and prepare to have a rationale. Let's say that you anticipate the team is going to be discussing speech and language services. I'm throwing something out there randomly. And they feel like, we might be able to do some articulation and something like that, but you feel like you'd like to have some social skills thrown in there too. well then you need to be prepared to discuss why you feel like that service is appropriate for your child and how it would address their needs, and answer questions when they ask you questions about that. And if you have documentation that backs up your rationale, even better. And so this is part of preparing for the meeting, because they will ask you questions if you have concerns like that. And as you should ask them questions if they have a proposal or something that they want to recommend that you don't necessarily agree with. You can ask questions as well. I would encourage you to put your thoughts and points in writing, because, and again, this is part of anticipating what you're going to be talking about, considering the parent agenda, all this stuff. When you're getting ready to go in there, maybe the day before, you want to jot down everything, because what happens is you get in that meeting and there's a process to these meetings, and you might not get to what you want to get to till halfway in the meeting and everybody's tired. It's been a long meeting, you're exhausted, you're getting a headache, or things are getting emotional. Whatever the reason is, you might forget what it was you wanted to talk about or ask or say. And so if it's written down, it's right there. You're not going to forget about it. It takes a little work on the front end, but it's way worth it when you get in that situation. I'd also encourage you to consult your calendar and have at the ready some dates and times that you're available to meet again. Should the meeting go long and you have to adjourn and reconvene your meeting, you've got some dates already there, and say, oh, I have these dates available. Does any of this match up with your schedules? Or if they say, well, you know what, we need to do some more testing, we'll meet back, and say, oh good, I already have my dates ready. Let's go ahead and look at the calendar. That's a very important thing to have ready at your meeting that you might not think about otherwise. And then I would also encourage you to have a plan B. We talked about anticipating and having ready a rationale. If there's something you'd like to ask for or have discussed that you want the team to consider as a recommendation for your child, it may not go your way. They may not agree with you, and they might have a solid rationale as to why. You might want to consider having a backup request or a backup plan, or say, well, okay, I see that you don't agree that they should have 90 minutes of speech and language therapy, but maybe we can look at 60 minutes. And this is why I think it would be important for us to consider that, and you go into your rationale. So have something prepared. If you feel like it's important enough not to get totally shot down, have something prepared to discuss to hopefully have them consider and say yes to. All right, now we're in the meeting. Let's talk about that, because that can be a very stressful thing. I know. My first IEP meeting was when my child was about to turn 3. And they had done a global evaluation on my child, and I was previously in another life, I was an educator for 20 years, and I wrote IEPs for students, and I participated in that, and also implementing the IEP in the classroom for multiple students over the years. And then I became a parent of a child with special needs. My oldest has autism, and so I was thrown into the world of autism and advocating for a child who has autism in the school system. So I've been on both sides of the table, so to speak, as an educator and as a parent. And so my first IEP meeting as a parent was a difficult one emotionally, because I was at a table with 12 other people and along a conference table, and they were all telling me things about my student that were hard to hear, quite frankly, as a parent, and I think we've all been there. So I vowed to walk out of the room and never feeling that way again, that I was going to get educated on all of this stuff about IDEA and about what an IEP is and what the protocol for it, the process, and what I can do to be an active participant in my students' team. So my student now is 15. So many years have passed, and trying to pay forward what I learned, and hopefully you will empower yourself and learn a little bit more too. The anxiety is no longer there. I can tell you, being empowered, you feel very encouraged going into these meetings. Even if it's a difficult meeting and you're not agreeing, the anxiety goes away the more you know. So I would encourage you, as you go into your meetings, to remember you are the key team member. Again, you're not the boss and the leader, but you are a key team member. Your participation, your contribution, your concerns, your questions, they all matter a great deal. Don't discount yourself. I would encourage you, as you go into the meeting, to consider that attitude is everything, as with anything else in life, and that when you're going into the meeting, again, this is business, so let's deal with facts and not feelings, and remove any unnecessary emotion. It is naturally an emotional thing because we love our students, and we're emotionally invested in them, and we want to see them succeed, and we are concerned about them. So that can play into how we approach our team members and how we approach how we ask for things or ask questions. And I would encourage you to just breathe before you walk in that room. Just breathe. It's going to be okay. And then I would encourage you to dress appropriately and behave in a business-like manner. You've been to a meeting before, hopefully all of you at this point, and you've seen how pretty much everyone else in the room dresses. I would recommend, because I get this question a lot from parents, how do I dress in an IP meeting where I can feel like I'm doing business, where I can feel like I'm respected and part of the team? I would suggest that you dress like your school administrator. If they're of the same sex as you, if you're male and they wear a tie, wear a tie. If they're female and they wear a dress, wear a dress. You want to be taken seriously. But I wouldn't encourage you to be uncomfortable with what you wear. Something that, not your track shoes and your yoga pants or your sweats, but something a little more business-like. And that'll help you feel like you're doing business. Also, you want to be respectful to the people in the room. Behave in a business-like manner. Call them by Mr. and Mrs. and wait your turn to talk, and all those things that we were taught to do to socialize properly with people. And I think most of us in the room can do that well. And then I would encourage you to have your materials organized and ready. We talked a little bit earlier about having your paperwork in a binder. That's a great way to be organized. But make sure when you get there and you're pulling out whatever it is you're setting on the table, pen and paper, or the previous year's IEP, or test results, or whatever you want to discuss at that meeting, that you're not fumbling for it, you're not digging in your bag, you're not, oh, wait, I think it's in the car. You don't have paper spread out. You've got it organized, neat, you're at the ready. Everything is where it needs to be for you to put your fingers on it. Also, when you're getting to the point in your meeting where you're writing goals, I encourage you to participate in the goal writing. Parents often tell me that's the point where their eyes glaze over and they're lost and they don't understand it all and they feel like it's all deep education speak and they don't know how to write a goal, so they don't feel like they should participate. I would encourage you participate, even if you don't really know what's going on. That's a good time to ask, and say, hey, can you tell me what that means? Or what if we do it, consider this. Goals are super important because they support your child's needs. That's the rubber meets the road. We have a need. How are we going to address it? We need to write a goal for it. And goals are supported by services and modifications and accommodations and supports. So goals are hugely important. And I would encourage you, just listen to what's being said about the proposed goals. Do they sound like your student? Or does that sound like someone else's student? Because if it doesn't sound like your student, it's probably not an appropriate goal for your student. So that's where you can be involved if you have very little experience writing goals or participating in the development of goals. Then I want to encourage you again, you know your student the best. You're an expert too. Speak up. Be an active participant. And that brings us to our next point, speaking up. If you don't understand something, please speak up. If you need something repeated or clarified, speak up. And if you agree or disagree with something, by all means, speak up. And it's okay to speak up and say, I agree with you. It's okay to speak up and say, I disagree with you. You might want to have your rationale ready if you don't. But it's okay to speak up at those times. And then I encourage you to be what's called an active listener. Active listening means things like taking notes, nodding your head to affirm that you're listening to somebody, making eye contact, asking questions, writing down things such as action items. The SLP is going to do an assessment on my child. Okay, let's write that down. Okay, when is that going to happen? You're writing this down. That's called an action item in a business meeting. That's something you can follow up on and monitor. Did that get done? Did this person do it? What was the result? And we said we were going to do it by October. Did it get done by October? That's how you keep up with that. Then another part of active listening is repeating back what you think you heard, just to be clear about it and to show some agreement or whatever we're discussing. Say, what I think I heard you say was blah, blah, blah. Or let me make sure I understand that we're going to do this. Repeating back is a great way to participate as an active listener. And then I would encourage you to do what's called asking W questions. If you don't understand something, what does that mean? Why are we doing that? Where is that going to take place? Who is going to be responsible for implementing that service? These are the W questions. These are also important to ask when they have a recommendation that you don't agree with. Say, well, now why do you feel that we need to do that? Where is the data for that? What would that look like? Who's going to be doing that? And then sometimes when you're asking these W questions for something you don't agree with, it opens up discussion, and then it sometimes shows itself to be not appropriate for your student. So it's a great way to get some conversation going, get some discussion going. Now, after the meeting, that's all during the meeting. We're being businesslike, we're organized, we're taking notes, we're participating in the goal writing. Now, what do we do after the meeting? There's things you can do after the meeting that are also important. And there's two main things we're going to do, and that is to read and review the IEP. And I say IEP, that's now the document that you've been handed at the end of the meeting. And then also to communicate after the meeting. Part of reading and reviewing the IEP is to revisit your parent and student agenda. You've got the IEP on one side of your desk and student and parent agenda on the other. Did everything that you wanted to discuss or ask about or address get addressed in the IEP? Are we missing something here? Do I need to go back and get that clarified? Where is this that we said we were going to do? You see, you go back to your notes, go back to your agendas, and make sure everything's in there. If you have students in the two-county area, one of the two-county schools here, most of the time you'll find that all of the IEPs are generated or developed in a room with a computer, and it's a screen like this with a drop-down menu, and they're clicking on things. It's a great way to get it all in there. I have no problem with that. There's one problem that can happen if you do a customized entry where it's not a drop down and click, where you're typing something in. If they don't hit the save button, it won't print on your IEP. And I see it all the time. So this is a great thing for you to do, to go back and review and make sure everything that y'all talked about in your meeting is going to actually show up in the IEP or the draft that they hand you at the end of the meeting. You can either sign the IEP and return it, or you can meet back to discuss revisions that need to be made, questions that need to be asked, some clarification, other reconsidering of suggestions or recommendations by the school. And I would encourage you, at the end of the meeting, they're going to ask you to sign the IEP. You have the right to not sign it until you've reviewed it at your leisure. They might tell you you have to sign it, and that's true. Eventually you do, or they can implement it without your consent, but you don't have to sign it there. You say, well, I'd really like to take this home with me and read it a little bit more carefully, or I'd like my spouse to review it with me and they're not here today, or I've got a killer headache and I just really want to go home and get rid of it and then have some time to read this. Whatever your reason is, you have the right to do that, and I don't know if you're aware of that. So you do need to sign the participation page, but not necessarily consent page right then and there. If you're totally happy with the IEP and you've checked it over very well and you're ready just to sign, you can sign. But I recommend that you take some time to review it, because more often than not you'll see little things that need to be addressed. It could be a typo, it could be a complete omission, something that you typed in and didn't get saved. or something even worse, totally missed something, or it could be anything. So make sure you do that. And then communicate with your team. I always recommend that you do a thank you note, whether in the form of an email, an actual handwritten note, a letter to the school. You want to thank all your team members that were there. Let's say you had a wonderful meeting, and you're free to express that. Thank you for such a great meeting. I feel positive about how things are going. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your input. I understand we're going to be meeting back. You're going to follow it with action items. We're going to meet back at this date, or Susie Q said she was going to do this, and Mrs. So-and-so said she was going to do this. You're following it with communication. Let's say your meeting didn't go well. Let's say, everybody was unhappy when they left, and you were totally in disagreement. You still write a thank you note. Still. And the least you can do is thank them for their time and their input to meet with you. And I tell you, that goes a long way. You're saying, we are a team no matter what. And let's work together to be a team for the ultimate goal, which is that child's success in school. So always send a thank you note, no matter how you feel about the meeting at the end. Now, I would encourage you, like I said, to put in the action items in your note or email. Email is a great way to communicate with your team nowadays, because most school personnel do communicate that way with one another. And then you'll have something to print out. Put your communication tab in your binder. Then I would encourage you to continue with your communication. I tell parents, you need to do RRP. And what that means is you need to initiate regular, relevant, and positive communication. And what I mean by that is regular is not like every day you're bugging these people, but regular enough that you feel like you're monitoring what's going on in the school effectively for your child. If there was some action item that you need to follow up on that. If you just want to check in and see how things are going, make sure that you do that regularly, and make sure it's relevant. Is it something that applies to what's in your child's education program and the IEP? Is it something that you feel like is a concern and you're supposed to be monitoring that? So make it relevant and make it always positive. Positive goes a long way for morale with the team. Someone that you're being nice to wants to be nice to you. Someone who you're encouraging and supporting wants to be encouraging and supportive of you and your child. So I would make it positive always. Somehow, some way, even if there's difficulty with you and the team. Also, after the meeting, I would encourage you to document the events of the meeting. Use whatever documentation method works for you, a checklist, some sort of form or minutes or some sort of record of what happened in the meeting. Could be notes to yourself, audio recording, something that you can keep a record of what happened, because by next meeting you may forget totally what you talked about, especially if there's a lot to discuss. And then I would encourage you to record the action items also. Whatever documentation you select, and there's many out there, and if you Google IEP meeting checklist, you'll find lots. You'll find lots of great tools. And then we'll have all these things where you can record action items, names and positions and dates of things that were promised to do, and how to record minutes. All those type of things. Just if you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of those templates are already out there. It's good to organize your documents that you received at the meeting. You will get a draft of the IEP, of course. You will probably get some testing information. You may get progress report. You may get a speech and language report. All these things are important for you to go ahead and organize in your binder. So make sure you do that shortly after the meeting and not let it pile up. And then if it's for a new IEP for the next school year, you create a new binder for that, with that new year listed on the spine. Not everybody does that, but most people who do it tell me it's the best way to do it. And I agree, I do it that way too. And I have a locked cabinet with binder after binder, starting from the beginning to now. And I just pull the year that I need to reference. It's that easy. Then for those of you who are very organized or who are engineers, You probably know what a master list is. And I would encourage you, if you know anything about that, and that's how your brain works and that's how you stay organized, to do a master list. A master list is basically your table of contents for all of your documents that you have in existence on your child. And that way you can look down and see, okay, that's in Notebook 2014-15 under this tab. Okay, I can find this assessment in this tab in this binder. And that'll keep you even more organized if you need to find something quickly. Now, in order to keep tabs on your child's progress, you're going to be following along with what is in your notes and in your records, as well as what the school is providing you. You'll be getting progress reports, midterm reports, end of grading period reports, correspondence, things like that. That's what you need to kind of make a note of. If there's anything remarkable or anything that deals with what your action items are, your concerns, make a note of that, how things are progressing. That's called a running record. And running records can be created a number of different ways. I use mine as a checklist, and it's a table printed out on a piece of paper because I'm very visual. I have to have that visual on there. Maybe it's you're keeping a journal, or maybe it's on the computer. However you keep it, to remind yourself. Maybe it's on your calendar. You've got a running record on your calendar. However it works for you to keep up with all this information. A little bit of word about the school. I have a good relationship with the schools. They don't see me as the enemy. They like that I'm training parents to be empowered and be effective team members. However, I'm very much in the parents' corner and not the school's corner. I'm here to help you guys. And because we're friendly with one another, I've been able to get some information from the schools over time to say, what is it that you would like to see as a wish list for parents out there? And I think it's been very encouraging to see over and over and over again the same 6 or 7 things that the schools are saying to me that they would like to see on their wish list for parents. The first one is for you to be educated in IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that surprised me at first because I think that most parents feel like the school doesn't want them to be educated, but they do. It makes for more effective teams when everyone's understanding the law, and I think it makes you more empowered. There's less anxiety, there's less worry about what's going on. You know what your student is entitled to. They also want you to be familiarized with the IEP process and protocol. And when I mean the process and protocol, I'm talking about the order that they construct or develop the IEP. We can't determine placement until we've determined what the needs are. We can't determine service hours until we determine the goals. You see, there's a process and a protocol to things. We can't write an IEP until a student's been evaluated. We can't determine eligibility until they've been evaluated. So there's all these steps, and they have to go in a certain order. And the school system has expressed more than one time that they would like for you guys to be kind of familiar with that process and protocol. I think it'd be helpful for you to know it too. There's a training series that I do that'll be available soon on our web that goes through this whole process. It's a 10-step process to developing and monitoring an IEP, and that'll soon be available to you. And I'll give you some information at the end of the program for how you can access that eventually. They also want you to participate in the meetings and share your thoughts and concerns and include your child if appropriate. They want you to be a part of this. They want you to speak up. They want you to include your child in the meeting. Your child has a right to be in their meetings, if appropriate. I mean, that's a kind of a judgment call for you guys to make as you and the team, if you feel like it's appropriate for your student to attend. But it's strongly encouraged by the time the student's 12, because that's the age that transition services start to be included in the IEP document, and they need a voice at that point. Self-advocacy is a great skill for our students to learn. Also, they want you to view the school-based team as a group of professionals that are dedicated to caring and assisting your child in education. Well, that's a no-brainer. Of course they want us to think that. And we should think that because they are trained, they are professionals, but hopefully we have an attitude about that too that's a positive attitude, because they are the ones that are working with our children every day. They also want you to be aware that the school is obligated to support the educational needs of your student, not necessarily the clinical needs. Your student may have a medical diagnosis that does not show up as an educational or program listing on your IEP. Let's say your student has a medical diagnosis of autism, but not necessarily an educational diagnosis of autism. It might say developmental disorder, or it might say something else, OHI. There's a reason for that, because medical diagnoses are determined differently than educational diagnoses. Doesn't mean that the school disagrees that your child has autism, for instance, but how the child's needs affect their learning is the only thing they look at, not how the child's needs affect their health, only how it affects their learning. So there's some confusion with that, and educators say they'd like for you to know the difference. And again, one of my training series goes into that in more detail if you'd like to access that later. But most importantly, and I hear this over and over again, is that they want you to understand and articulate your child's individual needs to them so that they can be identified and addressed as accurately and effectively as possible, and they can implement the services and program that is most appropriate for your child. There's nothing more frustrating to a teacher who gets a special needs student who knows nothing about that student, and there's a time period to get to know the student and to trial things with the student educationally that may or may not work, that may frustrate the student, that may not challenge the student. It's a learning process for that team if they don't have that primer, that information, that list that you can give them of what your students' needs are, how they were performing before they even got to this team. Let's say you moved to a new school district. It would be great to have some information to this team ahead of time. There's no lapse of time, no lag time of services. They're hitting the ground running with what they know works. Now let's talk a little bit about problem solving, because the reality is not every IEP meeting goes well, not everybody on the team gets along well, and there can be problems at times. And there probably will be at some point. There has been for me in my IEP meetings at times, and it's probably going to be true for you too. The first thing I'd recommend to you to consider is that diplomacy is king. Whether you feel like being diplomatic or not, that's the right approach every time, because these are the team members that you will likely be working with throughout the time that your child is at that school, sometimes maybe afterwards, because these professionals might not stay at that school. Let's say juniors at the middle school now, you got your team here, but what if one of your team members that you really can't stand and have an issue with moves to the high school when your child does, you see? You need to kind of consider that these might be the people that you always have with your student. That's the attitude you need to keep. Okay, how can I best work with this person I either have a personality disagreement with, or I really can't get them to listen to me, or whatever it is, whatever the problem is, consider that these are the people you will likely be working with always. And then figure out how you can work best with that person. Also, you need to learn how to rephrase criticism to motivate the team to positive action. And what I mean by that is to say, and now, and not but. I can give you an example of this. Let's say that my child was mowing the lawn and clipping the bushes. And he did a really great job of clipping the bushes, but not so good a job mowing the lawn. And I said, okay, son, I really like how you clip those bushes. You did a great job, but the lawn is kind of raggy. You missed some spots. You need to go back and take care of that. So what is my student or my child hearing? Are they hearing that I really liked how you worked on the bushes? Or are they hearing, wow, I really don't like how you messed up the lawn or didn't do a good job mowing the lawn? It's kind of a negative, isn't it? So you might want to consider, instead of saying but, saying and now. And I'll give you an example. Well, son, I really liked how you worked on the hedges. You did a great job clipping them. They look beautiful. And now let's talk about how we can improve your mowing. You see, now I'm inviting my son to listen and enter into a discussion and maybe agree with me. It's not a direct criticism. It's not a negative criticism. It's still criticizing, but now it's a positive spin on it. You can do that with your team too. Say, I really like how this program's going so far as the speech and the OT. And now can we talk about how things are going in PE? You see what I did? Instead of saying, but I really have a problem with how things are going in PE. Which do you think the team's more readily going to jump in the discussion and listen to you? I would be shut off already hearing the but, personally. So think about those type of things, how it comes out of your mouth, what the perception is. Also, I want to talk to you a little bit about, and again, this is problem solving. Beware of the trap of what I call faulty thinking. And there's three main areas that I see over and over and over again that parents consult with me about and school teams, and these are the biggies. Blaming, excuses, and stonewalling and escalating. Blaming is a big one, where you say, well, you did that, or you didn't do that, or because of that, this happened. Need to think about phrasing those type of concerns in a way that doesn't lay blame. And that's hard to do because we care a lot about our students, and sometimes we get our feelings hurt about things that don't go right, or someone did do something that shouldn't have been done, or didn't do something that should have been done. Yes, but how we phrase that with the team, how we approach the team with it, you've got to be thinking, is this hurtful? Is this helpful? Will it get the result I want? How can I get us to say yes? How can I get us to agree? How can I get us to get to the point where we have action on this item? Not that we're venting and carrying on a conversation that's going nowhere. So blaming, I think, stalls a lot of progress with the team as far as problem solving is concerned. Also excuses. And this is excuses on both sides that I see. I see a big problem with excuses for the school saying, we don't have enough funding, we don't have the staff, we don't have that program implemented, we don't have the equipment, we are this. Now under IDEA 2004, none of those are valid excuses. Because your student, according to the law, your student's needs must be met no matter what the funding issue or the staffing issue or whatever. But it's an excuse that you might hear. Another form of an excuse as far as on the other side would be from the parent side, and I hear this sometimes, and I want to caution you against it. Using the excuse of your child's disability or your child's need to say, well, I feel like this isn't going well and you're not implementing this because of my student's disability, you see. Or they push that chair over because they have autism, when maybe what was the function of the behavior? Let's get to that. Maybe it was something else. Maybe they were frustrated with something. Let's think about using excuses, not using excuses, and looking at the valid reason for what's going on. Faulty thinking always leads to problems building an effective team, which leads to ineffective strategies and inefficiency and lag time of services and supports that could be put in place for your student. And that's why I encourage you to avoid faulty thinking. Now let's talk about stonewalling and escalating for a minute. I see that happen in teams sometimes where I'm just having a problem with that team member, or I'm just upset and I don't want to talk right now, and they're stonewalling each other. That means you're not communicating. Well, what good can come from that? And then there's the opposite extreme of that, which is escalating. Now we're upset, and now we're standing up and yelling, or now we're leaving the room, or we're pointing the finger and getting red in the face, or we're exacerbating a problem. So all those things are no good. Those will take the train off the track pretty quick. So I would encourage you to stop and think about how it's coming across to others and how you can get everyone to come, invite them to agree with you. Okay, finally, let's get to some tips. Most of you hopefully know about some of these things, but I think they're worth sharing just in case. IEP meetings can be called at any time by you or the school. Did you know that? Some people think IEP meetings are only called by the school. That's not true. You can call a meeting too. And IEP meetings can at any point be adjourned and reconvened upon your request. Okay, I'm getting tired. This meeting's going too long. I gotta get to, my job or whatever. Let's adjourn and reconvene. You can do that. Or if things are not going well, you can adjourn and reconvene. You don't have to say that's why. I think, maybe we need to adjourn and reconvene. Whatever the reason is, you have the right to do that. And the IEPs can be amended throughout the year. 2004 revision of IDEA allows for what's called amendments to your IEP. You don't have to convene the whole team to do a minor amendment to your education program. You can do that through the form of an amendment. But you can convene the whole team at any point during the year multiple times. You have what's called an annual review, which is one time a year. You review what's current in the IEP. You consider what's going to be in the next IEP. You can do that multiple times in the year as needed. You need to have a reason to do it. If the child's making progress, non-progress, there's a new behavior, whatever the reason might be. And then some people are told that IEP meetings have to have a set time. I hear this a lot, especially in one of our counties. Oh, we're only going from 8 to 9. Well, says who? IDEA doesn't say that. IDEA says that IEP meetings do not have a set time limit, and they must be scheduled at your convenience. Did you know that? This is why I say come ready with a bunch of dates and times that you can have the whole team consider. And then it doesn't have to go 1 or 2 hours or 30 minutes or whatever they say. Your IEP meeting can go all day. I wouldn't recommend it, but it could legally. So don't be hampered by that. Also, I would encourage you to bring a photo of your child to the meeting. If your child does not attend the meeting, some people put it on the little sleeve in the front, that clear sleeve that's in the front of your 3-ring binder. That's a great place to put the photo. A pen with your child's face on it. Set up a little frame with your child in it, because that's why we're meeting. This is who we're meeting for. This is why we're all going through this amount of trouble and care and concern and developing this program. So it's just a little reminder of what we're here for. And then, did you know that you can bring a friend or a relative or anyone with an interest in your child's education with you to the meeting? Yeah, you can. Don't go alone. If you can help it, don't go alone. Have some moral support. Even if they sit there and don't say anything, they're still there for you, for your child. But be aware that if you bring somebody to the meeting, you need to make sure they're included on the meeting notice. When you sign that meeting notice that you get, also put on there, oh, and so will be attending, and send it back. If you don't get a meeting notice, make sure you give them that information before you do come. Also, you may request school or county personnel to attend. Let's say there's somebody you really want at the meeting that doesn't normally come to the meeting. Like, let's just say the art teacher, for instance, because you're hearing some things going on in the art class that are good or bad or concerns. And you say, I'd really like to have that teacher attend the meeting. You can request that. Let's say I'd really like to have a county or a district representative there in whatever field or area. You can ask for that. You absolutely can ask for that. Then I want to talk a little bit about the power of the pen. We talked about you don't have to sign the IEP at the meeting. That's true. And then if you have concerns that you feel like are not being addressed, or you feel like you're not being listened to, write a letter. Letters cannot be ignored. Letters carry legal weight. If you write a letter to the school, for instance, requesting records for your child, which is a pretty typical letter to get at a school, they have 10 days to respond to you. If you ask for an evaluation to be done on your student, that's a great time to pull out your paper and pen and write a letter. Again, they have to respond to you. If you send a concern or request through email or a handwritten note or face-to-face, it can be ignored legally. So if there's something serious or important that you want to address, make sure you do it as a letter. And I would address it to the school principal, unless you have an ESC coordinator at your school or a liaison, and it goes to them. But always send it to the school, not the county, the school. All right, but wait, there's more. If you want to learn a little bit more about what I very basically breezed over, because there's a lot more to go over. This is just a basic overview. Then we have a program at Autism Pensacola that we just started called the Parent Partner Support Program. Just launched this year. And it's meant for parents and caregivers who have students with an IEP or Section 504 that need more help with their plan, with their program, with their team, anything like that to deal with the IEP. That's what we're here for. Here's the direct link to that program on our website, or you can email me at iephelp@autismpensacola.org, and that's all up here on the slide.